Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to another live edition of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast, brought to you by the 90 Min Football family. As ever, I'm your host, Harry Simiu, and on this edition of the show, we're going to be talking some transfer news. We're going to be discussing the links to Amadou Onana. Is he on his way to Arsenal? Is that a realistic prospect during this January window? If so, how can Arsenal afford it? And should they, if they can afford it, be prioritizing another position? We're going to get into all of that on this live edition of the show. Don't go anywhere. Stay with me. Make sure you leave a like on the video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you're listening on audio, well, why haven't you left us a review yet? If you have, thank you very much. If you haven't, head over there now and do so. It really, really does help. So let's get into it then. Amadou Onana, is he on his way to Arsenal? So, reports emerged yesterday from a number of people. Sasha Tavalieri was the first journalist to break the story, a Belgian football-based journalist who I've come across a few times. Never worked with him before or spoken to him directly, but when I say I've come across him, I've come across his work quite a bit. I know he's a regular on Tom's the Gooner Talk TV. So I've got no reason to question the source or to doubt the source. However, I've been told this morning that there has been zero contact between Arsenal and Everton over the potential transfer of Amadou Onana during this window. Now, Arsenal have a long-standing interest in Amadou Onana. He's a player that's been linked with us before. He's a player that, according to various sources, Mikel Arteta admires and likes. But is there a chance that this deal gets done in January? Well, of course, there's a chance, but how big is that chance? Not very big, in my opinion. Based on the information I've had this morning, it doesn't look like Arsenal have made any official contact with Everton. It kind of goes in line with what we've been saying actually over the last few weeks, that until Arsenal move players on, until Arsenal are able to generate some funds due to the profit and sustainability rules, they're not going to be able to drop down £50 million, which is what Everton supposedly want for Amadou Onana. Now, what are my thoughts on the player? I don't think he is an elite level midfielder. I think that he is someone who lacks in a couple of departments. I think physically he's fantastic. I think he's incredibly powerful, quick across the ground, very strong, has been in the Premier League for a little while now, so knows it inside out, wouldn't need, you'd feel, that adaptation period. But in terms of his technical level, and I know Tom disagrees with this over on the Gooner Talk TV because he said as much on the show this morning. I don't think that his technical level is where it needs to be. Now, I accept that my benchmark in terms of what I require from a midfielder on the technical side of things is very high. So I look at Thomas Partey, I look at Jorginho, I look at that type of player. I don't even think that Declan Rice's technical level, this might be controversial, is of the very, very highest level. I think that Declan Rice is an incredibly great athlete, very strong, very powerful, can play a pass. Obviously, technically, he's very good, but is he at that elite level in terms of his ability to break lines, his ability to, pick out passes, thread the ball through the eye of a needle? I don't think that's Declan Rice's game. I think that what Declan Rice does is a lot of those things in terms of carrying the ball and progressing it, but he does it in a different way. He uses his frame, he uses his sort of powerful style to be able to carry the ball through the lines, and he just does it in a different way. Now, that's fine, but I think that one of the problems we've had, as I keep saying in recent weeks, is that we don't seem to be able to progress the ball through the lines quickly enough. And I think one of the reasons that we created so much against Liverpool the other day was because we had Jorginho back in the side. Now, people would disagree with that. People will say that that's not true, or that I'm making too much of Jorginho's impact on that particular day. I think Thomas Partey is one of the best in the business at that. And I think that's why we've missed him so much. And that's why that despite sort of opportunities maybe to sell him in the summer, Mikel Arteta didn't want to let that happen. He wanted to try and keep a hold of him. He wanted to try and keep him as part of the makeup of the squad. Now, unfortunately, that hasn't really worked out for us at the start of this season because of the injury problems that he's had. But that's what his value is. That's where his value is. Amadou Onana might be able to improve and develop in those particular areas, but is he on the same level as Partey and Jorginho in terms of his passing and vision at this moment in time? I would argue that he's not. Now, what he does give you is physicality in an abundance, and maybe having an Amadou Onana alongside Declan Rice would give somebody like Martin Odegaard or Kai Havertz, if he's the one that plays as the most advanced midfielder, that little bit more license than they currently get, because the balance will be better. The balance would mean that those players can do less work backwards and focus more on popping up in those pockets of space that we want to use. Popping up in those pockets of space that, we look to work the ball in nice and early. And that's a big part of how, as I say, we create chances and create goal scoring opportunities. So I'm not massively against the idea of signing Amadou Onana, by the way. And I think actually in today's market, 45 to 50 million pounds isn't that bad. I think he's got a very good skill set. I just don't know if it's the skill set that Mikel Arteta specifically is looking for. So that's where I'm a little bit unsure as to whether this would be the right move, given that we're very limited in what we can do at the moment, and B, I've got serious doubts about whether this is actually going to happen or not anyway. As I say, I was told this morning that there's been zero contact this window between Arsenal and Everton over the potential transfer of Amadou Onana. So there might well be an interest, like we know there's an interest in Martin Zubimendi over at Real Sociedad, but we also know that the likelihood of that happening in January is minimal. So I don't want people to get carried away with this. I don't want people to get too excited about it. Now, if it did happen, which again, I'm not completely ruling out, I just don't think it's very likely. But if it did happen, the first question that people would ask is, well, how the hell are we affording this? We constantly talk about how Arsenal are in a position right now where they need to be very, very careful due to the profit and sustainability rules. So how would they be able to go and do a 50 million pound deal? Well, we've seen Arsenal get creative. We've seen Arsenal get creative. We've seen Arsenal find different ways of doing deals. We've seen Arsenal, doing loans with options or obligations to buy. Now, if you're a selling club, an obligation to buy is what you want to put in there, isn't it? Because you want to guarantee your money. I think that, Arsenal will find a way to do deals, but there's a limit to what they can do, right? Like, you're not going to go and get a 100 million pound player without putting anything down up front. You're not going to go and get a 75 million pound player without putting down anything up front. The smaller or lower value deals are easier to kind of mold and sculpture into the way you want them. So, I think when people sit there and they go, and I know that this will be one of the real common responses that you get, it will be, well, if we've got 50 million pounds to go and sign Amadou Onana, again, I don't think it's going to happen, just to be clear, but people will say, well, how are we being linked with this guy? How is that ongoing? How is that even a conversation? Yet we need a striker, and we keep saying that we don't have the money to get one. Well, I think the answer to that is quite clear. I think, first of all, what top striker are you going to get for 50 million pounds? The answer is nobody. I think that Arsenal are a side that are looking at the very, very elite level of striker, and they will make a move to do that, I believe, in the summer. Maybe they're going to offload some players in January. They'll certainly offload some players in the summer, and that will go some way in allowing Arsenal to be able to do that. I think, as I say, Arsenal can get creative and do something smart if it comes to a low value deal, but then that means that you're very limited in the players that you can go out and sign. And I always say that the January window is one that is designed for opportunism, or thrives or works on opportunism. So, for example, you look at last January, we went and done some opportunistic deals to help us through. That's what you do in this window. I don't think that this is a window that many clubs factor into their planning too much. I mean, you look at some of the other clubs, you look at Spurs, they want another centre back. They're looking at Dragusin. That looks like it's probably going to happen now, but he would have been someone that they would have identified with a view to the long term. And hey, if you can get it done in January, great, happy days. But the massive high value deals tend not to happen in January, really, because of how difficult they are to do, B, what I mentioned yesterday, which is that the window is really short and you're relying on not just agreeing a deal with that club, but in a lot of cases, them then finding a replacement and all the rest of it. I think with somebody like Amadou Onana, Everton may be in a position where they have to sell because their financial situation isn't great either. We've seen them already punished. When it comes to somebody like, I don't know, Victor Osimhen or, Boniface or some of the other players that we're being linked with, those clubs don't need to sell at this moment in time and probably won't sell at this moment in time. Those clubs are in a position where they can fend off the interest until the summer. So this is where I circle back to that point about, opportunities coming up. Onana could be an opportunity because of Everton's situation. And that's why if Arsenal do go for it, they will be doing so. But, to me, like I always think with a transfer, right? I always go to myself, the first thing is, where has it come from? Where has the story come from? And the stories come from Sasha Tavalieri, who is a good journalist. There's no question about that. He's reported that there's interest. He's reported that there is some kind of conversation going on. Now, that conversation could be between Arsenal and the players' representatives. That conversation could be going on via an intermediary. These things do happen in football. There's often talks that happen. It shouldn't really be that way, but it does happen before the clubs get involved. So my information that Arsenal haven't spoken to Everton yet could be true, but also the information that Sasha Tavalieri, I beg your pardon, is reporting, which is that there is something in this, could also be true too. So this is not, let's shoot down someone else's report. I think it's one of those where the first thing I think about is A, where did it come from, as I say, and I think it's come from a good place in terms of the source. B, does it make sense? Now, the reason I can't completely rule this out is because it does make sense. He's a player that we've been linked with before. He's a player that we've had interest in before. He's a player that is very highly regarded on the Premier League scene. He's someone that we know has all the physical qualities that you want in a midfielder. I still have question marks about certain elements of his game, as I've mentioned. But add to that the fact that I've been saying for quite a long time that Arsenal do need a midfielder. And actually, it does make quite a bit of sense. It does make quite a bit of sense. And it makes sense because we are one Declan Rice injury away currently from being very weak in midfield. Now, I've talked about Jorginho, and I like Jorginho. I've always defended Jorginho. I've always backed Jorginho. I've always said that under the right circumstances, with the right players alongside him, you will get the best out of him. You will allow his technical quality to shine through. But you take Declan Rice out of the equation, especially right now with Thomas Partey out as well. There is no Granit Xhaka at the club anymore. And you have a very physically weak midfield. And so Onana would go some way in replacing the physicality that Rice brings, should he, touch wood it doesn't happen, pick up an injury. And the physicality that Thomas Partey, when fit, brings to the team as well. Look, we need a midfield player, and we will go and get a midfield player in the summer, I'm certain. The question is Onana the one that Arsenal are looking at with a view to the summer? And are they just simply exploring the possibility of doing the deal early? Is it a pivot in terms of what they want? I don't think it is. I think it is, it is one that they're going to look at because A, he's probably been a long-term target, but B, as Tom puts in the comments, it's an opportunistic buy if they do it because of Everton's financial crisis. Everton can't afford to have another mishap when it comes to the sustainability, profitability rules. They just can't. Look what's already happened to them. So, yeah, I mean, if I had to give this a percentage chance of happening, I would say that there is a 20% chance that Arsenal sign Amadou Onana in this window. And I only give it 20% because I know that Arsenal have looked at him in the past. But in terms of what we know right now, i.e., Arsenal need to release funds from somewhere to do this deal, or they'd have to negotiate something with Everton. Now, Everton might not be totally opposed to that, by the way, to receiving the money further down the line, because it might work for them in terms of their accounting, in terms of when that money goes through, when it shows on their books, etc., etc. Might buy them a bit of breathing space with the stadium and all the rest of it, because we know that's been a big resource drain on them. We know that they're receiving loans at the moment from their prospective new owners, by the way, who still haven't been ratified and confirmed by the Premier League, but they're receiving a loan because they need money. Now, is it easier to borrow money when you have a guarantee that X amount of money is coming in the summer? Probably is. You could probably write it off against that. I don't know. I don't know the intricacies of Everton's financial situation. All I'm simply saying is that, to me, that's why, if it's going to happen, it could happen. And that's why, if Arsenal are going to be able to negotiate some kind of structured deal, Everton may well be open to it. But in terms of whether or not this is likely at this moment in time, I don't give it any more than a 20% chance, 1 in 5, because I just don't think Arsenal can do the type of business that they want to do in this window, and that's going to frustrate Mikel Arteta. It's going to frustrate the fans, no question about that. But you can't really win as Arsenal Football Club, because we needed to spend the money that we spent over the last few years to get us back up to a level where we're competing. There was always going to be a consequence to that, though. There was always going to be a consequence because of the fact that we were buying, and not selling for anything really of note. At some point, this was always going to be an issue. And I think we have to accept that. And we're really unlucky at the moment with some of the players that we have out injured. And I think that has obviously caused some panic among the fans. Gabriel Jesus, who, there's a debate around whether he's clinical enough, but we know that he brings loads to the team. I don't have a problem with Arsenal playing the rest of the season with Gabriel Jesus up front. But when you hear that he's now out with a knee injury and with a problem on the same knee that he's suffered problems with previously, it does concern you. You think, how many times are you going to break down with the same issue, with a similar issue, with a related issue? And what does that mean moving forward? So there are lots of reasons to be concerned. I appreciate that. And, one of the things that really kind of frustrated me yesterday, obviously I put out my podcast, my thoughts on the Liverpool game and around the reaction to it. And, I tried to I'm not going to say I tried to defend the club, because I think there's a lot of things that I disagree with. There's a lot of decisions taken that I think you're well within your rights to question. But I also think sometimes circumstance can be the biggest killer, and there's nothing really you can do about that because you can't control it. We went into the season, I'll give you left back as a prime example, right? We went into the season looking at our backline and going, we've got Zinchenko, we've got Timber, we've got Tomiyasu, and we've got Kivior as a last option at left back. 4 options in that position. How many options can a manager realistically have in one position on the pitch? Yet we're in a situation where Tommy's at the Asian Cup. Timber got an injury that kept him out for the season, which again, nobody saw coming. Zinchenko's injured again, and Kivior's being asked to play in that position. That's the 4th choice left back, in my opinion, in this squad. So you can say, we need to have 2 great players in every position, but you will still have situations where you find yourself short and situations where you are thin on the ground. You look at the centre forward position. Now, not all of us believe that Eddie Nketiah is good enough. Mikel Arteta clearly does. Mikel Arteta rates him. Mikel Arteta sees something in Eddie Nketiah that a lot of us don't see. Fine. But his options up front going into the season were Jesus and Nketiah. He would have argued that Havertz can play there, which I think he can, by the way. I've been so frustrated with some of the nonsense I've read and heard about Kai Havertz since yesterday, because I think, with the exception of the finishing, and I know some will argue that's the most important part, I thought he had a really good game. And if you're going to then dig him out for the finishing, then you need to dig out the others as well that spurn better opportunities. So I want the analysis to be consistent. I want the analysis to be um, fair across the board. But that's three options there. You could even chuck Gabriel Martinelli in there. Some would like to see Leandro Trossard play as a false nine at times. So in terms of like personnel that could cover different positions, we did go into the season in better shape, but we've been decimated by injuries this season. And they're not injuries for 1 or 2 weeks. These are injuries for, 3, 4, 5, 6, sometimes months at a time. And you just end up in a position where it doesn't matter how much depth you have, you will still have difficult periods because the frequency with which players are getting injured in the modern game is just scary. It really, really is. And it's not a problem just at Arsenal. Chelsea will tell you the same thing. Tottenham will tell you the same thing. Manchester United will tell you the same thing. Liverpool would have told you the same thing at various points this season. Manchester City have been without Erling Haaland and Kevin De Bruyne, among others. It's just the nature of the beast nowadays. Now, some of you are saying in the chat that the fact that Mikel thinks that Eddie and Havertz are the guys is scary. Now, that's a fair opinion to have. It is a fair opinion to have. And for those of you that so a load of people came at me yesterday saying, whoops, nearly bloody knocked the table over. A load of people were coming at me yesterday saying that I was saying that we didn't need a striker. No, that's not true. I've been saying for a long, long time that we do need a killer striker, but that killer striker is unlikely to come in January, and it's more like a bit of summer business. And I've said that consistently. Is Arteta going to have changed his mind based on what we've seen in the last 3 matches? Maybe. Maybe he will. But that doesn't change the situation we have at the football club with the finances. That doesn't change the fact that we have to do deals in a certain way if we're going to do any deals at all at this stage. Do you get what I'm saying? Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. But just to kind of circle back and wrap up on the Onana thing, then we'll take a short pause. Then we'll just do your questions in the chat and all the rest of it. Is Onana coming to Arsenal? As far as I'm aware, it's not likely. As far as I'm aware, no conversations have taken place between Arsenal and Everton. Perhaps there's been some conversations behind the scenes that have maybe found their way out into the world. Hence why we're seeing reports of Arsenal being interested again. But at this stage, is it likely that Arsenal are going to sign Amadou Onana from Everton before this window is up at the end of the month? The answer is no. Okay, going to take a short pause. And when we come back, we'll dive into the chat box. And I want to talk to you guys a little bit about something that happened to me yesterday that I thought was really weird. Obviously, football related, Arsenal related as well. But I want to get you guys' thoughts and take on it. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Welcome back to the show. Hope you're all good. Hope you're all well. Thank you for listening as always. If you haven't done so already, please do leave a like on the video. If you're watching us on YouTube, if you're listening on audio, then please do subscribe, leave us a review, all the rest of it. You know the drill by now. I've got to say it because if I don't, it doesn't happen. But I know that it's annoying that I say it for those of you that do it as well. So apologies. Anyway, let's get into the live chat and see what you guys are saying because there's some interesting comments coming through. So get them in and I'll let those accumulate for a few minutes and then we'll dive over across to that. But I just wanted to say a big thanks to those of you that sort of messaged me yesterday. For those of you that don't know, I went on TalkSport yesterday in the morning to speak to a hero of mine, Jeff Stelling, brilliant broadcaster over the years, and Ali McCoist, who I absolutely love, to talk about the Arsenal game. We spoke about Arsenal's issues at the moment. We spoke about, what's gone wrong. And I sort of, I went down a similar line of what I'd been saying on the podcast. Like I'm not one that just creates opinions to try and either please people or drive clicks. Like, I'll give you my honest opinion. And my honest opinion at this moment in time when it comes to Arsenal is, how the hell can I sit there and berate a manager when he's putting out a team that's going out there and dominating football matches, but is just lacking that finishing touch? I keep saying that there's got to be some responsibility on those players. There's got to be some responsibility on those players when they find themselves in those positions to take the chances. That's what I was saying. Um, Jeff Stelling then sort of obviously took issue with what I was saying, because he was, and I don't know if he knew that I could see him. And this is the funny thing, right? I couldn't see Jeff Stelling and Ali McCoist on the Zoom link that I joined. So there's me talking away, talking, I think, reasonably, and trying to be respectful, even though I massively disagreed with the stuff he was saying. And then a little bit later on in the day, TalkSport released the video. They released a video on YouTube. If you go on the YouTube channel, if you type it in, I think it's Jeff Stelling clashes with Arsenal fan, or something like that. And the guy is like waving his arms up in the air, mouthing stuff when I'm speaking. I think he said bollocks or something like that when I was saying something. And I just thought, when I watched it, so I bear in mind I didn't see this live at the time. When I watched it, because someone sent it to me a little bit later on saying, mate, he was so rude. I watched it and I was a bit like, I guess then, like, if it's not someone shouting and swearing, going, oh, sack Mikel Arteta, then it's not worth listening to, I guess. But yeah, I just thought, like, I just think, you get me on to talk about Arsenal, and then you completely dismiss what I'm saying. And I thought it was rude that he's mouthing stuff, and all that. Maybe he forgot the cameras were on him. I don't know, throwing his head in his hands and all the rest of it. And it is one of those where you come across someone that you think is one of your heroes, and he's not anymore. And I respect the guy as a broadcaster, of course I do. And I thought about sort of putting something out on social media, and I decided, no, I won't do that. But I thought I'd say it here, because over the course of the evening, as I kind of checked the comments that were coming in, it weren't just me that thought it or noticed it. There was loads of people in the comments saying, like, what the hell is Jeff Stelling doing, sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, fine, not an issue. Like, I'm not a baby. I'm not going to sit and be upset about it or anything like that, or it's not going to play on my mind. But I just wanted to say thanks to those of you that messaged me about it, because at the time when I was doing the interview, I never even thought about it, because obviously I couldn't see him. And then I saw it after, and I thought, this is a bit childish, isn't it? But yeah, anyway, if that's how people sort of respect you when you go on air to talk to them, then I mean, I do a TalkSport show. I do it on TalkSport 2 every Friday from 3 till 6 p.m. I get loads of people in and loads of people on the phone that I disagree with. You will never catch me throwing my head in my hands, mouthing that they're talking bollocks in the middle of a show. I just think that's really, really poor form. But anyway, as Louis says, it's for the clicks and it's for the likes and all the rest of it. We know that's how you create the headline of Jeff Stelling clashes with Arsenal fan. Anyway, but yeah, we move on. Let's get some of your questions. Let's get some of your thoughts from the live chat box. There was a good question a little bit earlier on, which I hope I haven't lost. I'm just trying to scroll back and find it. Bear with me 1 second. I know we're live and it's annoying because you're listening and you're like, well, why the hell is this guy scrolling through a chat? This should be all sorted. Mr. Mute, here it is. He says, hey, Harry, was wanting to ask your thoughts on something about your video after the Liverpool game, and you talked about a backup to Saka. I was just wondering, do you think we should have kept Pepe? I don't think we should have kept Pepe, because I think that just the relationship between Arsenal, Arteta and Pepe was just dead. It wasn't ever going to go back to normal. He was never going to get a fair crack of the whip, in my opinion, because of the history of it. I never ever thought that Nicolas Pepe was as bad a player as people made him out to be. And I consistently said that. And I think he could have done a job on that right hand side for us. But that's the Nicolas Pepe that we signed all those years ago. I think he's been on a steady decline ever since. And I don't have any interest really in the current iteration of Nicolas Pepe. So I don't think he would have been of help to us. I think the problem we've got is that when we've been going and bringing wingers in, and you look at the wingers that we have, they're all very, very left-sided. And I don't mean left-footed. I mean players that do their best work from the left-hand side where they cut in. We don't really have another right-sided winger, one that wants to cut in from that side like Saka does. I kind of hoped, I have to say, that Marquinhos was going to be that when we first signed him. I know he's young. I know he was relatively unproven, but there were some really positive signs from him in the early days. And then he obviously never kicked on. He's gone out on loan to Nantes, and I think even they are trying to negotiate and broker a deal now that means he comes back to Arsenal. So that hasn't gone well. And so I don't think that's an option either, really. But the point I was making about Saka was not so much about Nicolas Pepe, but more about the fact that this is a guy that we just rely upon ever so much. And I don't know how often he can possibly be at 100% when it feels like every week we're talking about him being injured and having a kick and all the rest of it. So yeah, tough one. Tough one. Yeah, I wouldn't have brought Nicolas Pepe back, or I wouldn't have kept Nicolas Pepe. I think it's right that we moved him on and all the rest of it. But I do think that is a problem position for us. I still think that we need a midfielder more than that. I still think that we need a defender more than that. And I obviously think that we need a striker more than that. But it is one of the positions on the list. And, I think Mikel Arteta is just going to have to bite the bullet at certain points and use one of these predominantly left-sided wingers on the right. Like it's not ideal, but and it changes the way you play because that player is probably going to then want to go on the outside because they're right-footed and all of that, and that maybe impacts your playing patterns. But it needs to happen, in my opinion, because you can't ask this guy to play as much as he's playing at the moment and expect him to be at 100% all the time. What else have we got? The DJ Sweets. Lots of comments about the Jeff Stelling thing. Listen, guys, like, I don't care. Like, honestly, I don't care. I'm not bothered by it in the slightest. I just was surprised by it. And if I spoke to him, if I saw him tomorrow or the next day when I'm in the building, I'll go up to him and I'll say, like, what was that about? I would. I'm not a baby. I'm not going to sit there and start like tweeting and throwing my toys out the pram about it and all the rest of it. You're allowed to disagree with me. That's not the issue. I just thought the way it was done was just a little bit disrespectful. But anyway, it is what it is. And I don't need to say it, man. People have called it out already. He'll be aware of that. I know that people that in the building were aware of it. So that's it. I don't need to do anything more. But I just thought it's like, I just think that, in this space, like, yeah, everybody's entitled to an opinion. Everybody's got an opinion, and that's fine. I have opinions on other football clubs, but I also recognize that my opinions on other football clubs are probably not as valid because they're not as well researched and they're not coming from a position of the same level of education. So I'm fine with that. I just, it's just, it's just a simple respect thing in it, but it is what it is. Ahmad says, why do you think, and thank you for your very kind super chat as well. He says, why do you think Arteta hates Emile Smith-Rowe so much? I don't think he does. I don't think he does. I don't think there's any dislike there. I don't think there's any personal there. I'll tell you what I think it is. And some people will agree, some people would disagree. I think that with Emile Smith-Rowe, when Mikel Arteta first took the reins, he was a really, really important player for us. You think about that season that we narrowly missed out on the top four, and you go back to the first half of that season. Emile Smith-Rowe was as good as anybody. He was scoring goals. He was impacting games, coming in off that left-hand side. And then the injury problems began. Now, Mikel Arteta will have watched Emile Smith-Rowe go through his rehabilitation. He'd have watched him every single day. He'd have been around him in the gym, at the training ground. He'll know exactly, what the player was putting into the recovery. Now, I'm not suggesting that Emil Smith Rowe's not professional or wasn't giving it his absolute all. I don't question for a second that he wants to get back to playing regular football. But there must be something that Mikel Arteta is not totally satisfied with. Do you know what I think it is? I think it's his fitness levels. Now, I appreciate that you can only do so much on the training ground and that you need real game situations in order to build up that match fitness and match sharpness. I think that genuinely is a thing. You can go out on the training ground, you can work incredibly hard, but you can't replicate the intensity that you're going to face in a Premier League match, for example. But over the last few weeks, I think there have been opportunities, yes, to use Emil Smith Rowe. But if you're not totally convinced of his fitness, are you going to throw him in from the start? Clearly, Mikel Arteta thinks that he's only got 15 minutes at best in the tank right now. Is it a case of building it up slowly? Well, I think when your team's not performing and your team's, not performing is wrong. When your team's not producing results, I think you're well within your rights to, to think about these things and come to the conclusion of, well, I'm going to stick with the players that I trust because they're hopefully the ones that are going to get me through this. I think that, you look at someone like Emil Smith Rowe and you think, well, maybe he'd bring some fresh impetus and maybe he could make a difference. And perhaps he could, but he's fallen down the pecking order because he's been out for so long. And he has got to do enough in training and in the short cameo appearances that he gets to convince Mikel Arteta that he's back in the reckoning and he's someone that should be considered as one of the go-tos. I can only assume that he hasn't done enough. I can only assume that there's something about him that Mikel Arteta isn't totally satisfied. And I get annoyed when fans go, oh my God, it's a disgrace that he's not playing. I can't say it's a disgrace that he's not playing. I also can't say that it's fair that he's not playing because the truth is we don't know. We don't know the ins and outs of what's going on behind the scenes with Emil Smith Rowe. We don't know if it's a fitness thing. We don't know if it's an attitude thing. We don't know what it is, and that's why I'm trying to sort of stay calm on it because it's difficult from our position to have a real educated opinion on that matter. I think he is one that will probably be moved on in the summer, though. That I'll say that. Gary Griffin says, Harry, don't you think it's slightly ironic that so many fans wanted Xhaka out for years and now he's gone? People are complaining that he's left. I always said, be careful what you wish for. Oh, mate. If you saw some of the battles that I had on podcasts, on social media, defending Granit Xhaka during the course of the last few years, there's a tiny part of me that looks at it and thinks, a load of those fans out there that are now crying for him, you're just a load of hypocrites. You are just a load of hypocrites. People that I had major debates with and arguments with and clashes with are now sitting there tweeting about Granit Xhaka and how we miss him. You said he was the worst midfielder in the league 3 seasons ago. You didn't want to know him 2 seasons ago. You said that we desperately needed to upgrade on him. And now all of a sudden he's the crux of all of Arsenal's problems. Nah, not having it. Not having it. Granit Xhaka was great last season. He was good the season before. He was solid for a number of seasons and was often the scapegoat. And the problem is that when one scapegoat goes, those types of people, they need to find another one. And they found another one in Kai Havertz. Because, Kai Havertz has scored more goals this season than some of their heroes. Yet they would never dare criticize them or call them out for poor finishing. Yet the minute Kai Havertz misses a chance, it's a big breaking news story. So, yeah, I think you're right. It is slightly ironic. Right, guys, I'm going to leave it there. Need to dash. We've got a special 90 Min show coming up in a little while. We don't normally do them on Tuesdays, but as it's the transfer window, we're going to bring you a little bit more content. So if you're interested in that, go over to the 90 Min channel. Thanks for all listening. Thanks for tuning in. Really enjoyed the conversation. As always, Amadou Onana, is it happening? I don't think so. Can Arsenal afford him? I'm not sure. I think they'd have to get creative. Is that possible because of Everton's situation? Maybe, but is this a deal that is imminent? Not to my knowledge. So don't get too carried away with this one. Don't forget to leave a like on the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And we'll be back very, very soon with more right here on the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Until the next time, take care.